Hi, welcome back. This is the third lesson in our acrylic painting class for ages 9 to 16. I've got another still life that I set up today that we're going to paint again. Again, just find objects around your house that are white or one color are usually the best, but you can paint just about anything. But pick, pretty simple shapes. That makes it a lot easier. So I've got this set up here and we're pretty much ready to go. So let's get to painting. Hey, so if we look at our color wheel here, we can see these spots over here, the yellow, orange, crimson, and violet. These are all our warm colors over here. So we're only going to use the warm colors today. And to make like this violet color, we're going to use a little bit of purple and a little bit of crimson. So if I got my palette out here, these are the colors that I'm working with today. I've got some yellow, and just a little bit of that naphthol red to get my orange. I've got the naphthol red, the crimson, and then crimson with just a tiny little bit of purple that I'm going to mix to get our violet color. So with yellow, orange, orangish red, red, and then violet over here. Well, before I start painting, I want to sketch it out again. I've got my still life over there, and just remember, you don't have to get everything into your painting, and sketch it out really lightly and just kind of get in what you feel like you can get in. So I'm going to work on the bucket, that upside down bucket today, because last time we really got focused on the spheres that were over there. So I'm going to work on that bucket and try and get this can in there today. And work on that instead. And I'm just lightly drawing it so I can just barely see the drawing, because I'll always just paint it anyways. And let's draw this cube in there. Get the cube, and I can just barely see the edge of that cube. That goes up to about there. And then kind of goes out in the front a little bit like this. And we get that cube about like there. And the bottom of our cube will come over here. The top kind of goes off something like this. Something like that. And then we have our sphere butted up against the edge of that cube, and I can't really see the other sphere. So I've got that over there. Alright, so we're going to start with our darkest part again, our shadows. And the shadows that I can really see the best are like right around there on the edge of that bucket, and then right on the bottom of my cube. If you can see that, like right around there is like the darkest dark spots. And then there's a shadow. You can't see it too well. Let me get that out of the way. There we go. A shadow right underneath the sphere. Right at the bottom of the sphere, right around there are our darkest spots. But I'm just going to go from one shape to the other again so that my paint doesn't dry out when I'm trying to mix it. So let's get some of this purple mixed with the crimson and make a little violet color. I might need a little more purple than that. I didn't squeeze out a lot. But again, when I'm mixing my colors, I want to go with just a little bit of that dark color, the darkest color, because I can always add more to it. It's a lot harder to add the weaker color to try and lighten it up. You can always just take a little bit of that darker color and mix that in to get it darker. To try and get it lighter is a lot harder than trying to get it darker. Looks pretty good. Maybe a little more purple in there. Make that nice violet color. That's going to be our darkest color. That's going to take our shadows. Alright, let's get a little water on our brush. Yeah, You can't even see that, but that's okay. We'll put the water right there. Right around here. Let's wash it out a little bit. Wipe it off on our paper towel. And we're going to start with this bucket. And right here on the edge of the bucket is the darkest dark that I can see on it. So I'm going to start with that and paint some of that in. And it goes about to the top. So we'll go all the way to the top with it there. Get that painted in. And then I'm going to move into my crimson and start blending that in. So we'll get some crimson on there. Get that crimson moving in there and kind of blend it in just a little bit. Of course, I'll go in and blend it a little better with my dry brush. Only going to use these two brushes today, but if you find you want to get really detailed with it, use one of your smaller brushes too near the end to kind of detail things out if you want to. All right, around to this point in the middle, it's starting to get a little lighter. It's hard to, there we go. Around in that spot, it's starting to get a little lighter. So I want to put in some of that naphthol red about there and have it start moving into an orange color and then finally into the yellow. The yellow will be our lightest spot on the edge. You can see on the left hand side of it, it's going to be the lighter spot. And sometimes when I have a big surface area to cover like this, I'll put like some globby bits of paint on there. I actually want it sitting up on here so it's even easier to paint. I'll put like some bigger globs of paint on there and then kind of smooth them out with the brush and then with my dry brush. But don't leave like big globs of paint on there because it makes it really hard to paint over it. All right, that looks pretty good. Before I get too far, I want to blend it a little bit with my dry brush. There we go. Looks pretty good. And clean off my dry brush. Make sure I get that clean and then wipe it off. We don't need you, Mr. Pencil. You can go away, Mr. Pencil. We're done with you for now. All right. And now I've got to mix up some of that orange. So just a little bit of the naphthol red with a lot of yellow. You can see the yellow goes away pretty quickly. Yellow is the weakest color, and anything you mix with yellow, you want to use just a little bit and a lot of yellow. And then you can always add more of the stronger color if you need to. There, and I got too much paint on this brush, so I want to wipe it off. And start mixing in some of the orange here. You can see this color is a little bit lighter than my naphthol red, which is what we want. It's looking pretty good. And right around here is where it starts to get the lightest spot on that bucket. And we will start using our yellow once we get to there. So that's pretty good. And I kind of blend this in a little bit with this brush. And of course I'll go back in with the dry brush to make it even better. So clean that brush off again. You notice I clean my brushes quite a lot. Always have some water and a paper towel near you. Clean them off because you can always blend it in and get it a little darker if you need to later or whatever. What I don't like, especially when I go to a lighter color, like I don't want to have that darker paint on this brush though, because it could mix in there and then you don't get that pure color. Well, just sit down there if you want to. I wanted it a little bit closer to me, but you can just sit down there. So I've already started blending it in, I've got a little mixed too much of that on there. So I wipe some of that off. And then go back to the lighter spot and get that in there first. And then go back in and mix it. Looks pretty good. Now I'll start blending it. You want to get all of those little white dots off of the canvas too, and really blend it and smooth it out. And then now I'll go in with my dry brush and really smooth it out. And I'll start from the lighter spot and go to the darker so I don't pollute it too much, and I keep that nice bright yellow in there. And then I'll start going back the other way. That looks pretty good though. I like it. All right. If you blend from lighter to darker, you know, usually it doesn't get too light once you get down to the end. But I usually go from light to dark and then back from dark to light and kind of blend it in nice and smooth. But yeah, we got some good gradation there. That looks nice. I think we need just a little more yellow. Just right here on the edge though. Get that edge, the lip, you know, so it looks rounded. Get that perfect. And then I need to get this line a little bit darker in there too. Just a little bit. All right. So the top, get both my brushes clean first. So now the top looks like it's darker near the back and lighter near the front, but none of it ever gets this light at that lightest spot. So I'm going to go in with the Naphthol red near the back because it's kind of like a mid-tone. Go with some of that near the back of this and then have it move maybe into my orange or so. There we go. I'm going to have it move into the orange because it is darker than that yellow. We want it to be a little bit darker on the top than it is on the left side. It's just how I see it. You know, you paint it how you see it. If you think that, you know, a spot like this should be that yellow, then it should be yellow. You know, I like to look at it and kind of compare it to what I've already painted. And be like, well, you know, this spot here does look darker to me than this on my still life. So that's why I'll paint it a little darker. And I'm going to use my dry brush to smooth her out a little bit. There we go. Looks good. Clean that off. We can start working on the can. So on the left side of the can here, it looks like a really light spot, so that's going to be yellow. The right side doesn't look as dark as this spot here, so I'm not going to go with the purple there. I'm going to go with the crimson because it's not as dark as that other spot. Then we'll go from moving from like the crimson as the darkest spot to our yellow as the lighter spot. A little more water on the brush. Gotta always be dipping it back into the water so you can smooth it out, but you never want like dripping water on your brush, of course. Sure you figured that out by now. Alright, that's about as far as we want to go with that. And then we'll get some Naphthol red in there and move it into some orange and some yellow. Get some of this on there. Smooth that out to about there. Looks pretty good. And I'll get our orange. You could work the other way if you want to, though, too. You could go from light to dark. There isn't really a right or wrong way to do it. You get a drip like I got there, but sometimes you want to just dab that off with your paper towel, though. I don't want no drips. Don't want no drips on my painting, please. And if it gets a little too wet on the surface, too, you can still always hit that with either with a dry brush or with the paper towel, too. Looks a little too wet for me. I don't like it. A little too wet. So I'll go back in and put that paint back in there. Smooth that out a bit. And I'm not worried about this over here because I'm just going to paint over that anyways. So, you know, don't worry too much about some spots. You can always repaint it. That's why painting is one of the best art forms. So if you make a mistake, you can always paint over it. You don't ever have to stress about painting. It can always be fixed, redone. You don't have to worry about it. There, that looks pretty good. And let's smooth it out a little bit with our dry brush. Get the brush dry and smooth it out a little bit. Now I'm not too worried about like painting the ridges or anything on that can. I just don't care. But if you wanted to do something like that, put in little details, of course, go ahead and do it. I just don't want it in my painting, and I'm just not going to bother. And that's one of the great things about painting from like a still life like this, is you get to decide what goes in your painting and what doesn't. You don't have to put everything in there. Like if I wanted it to look exactly like that, I would just take a picture. I said that last week, but I want to really stress that. Like you're not painting to make an exact representation of what you see in front of you. You're painting to make a nice painting. And if the way you're doing it makes a nice painting, that's all that really matters. So don't stress too much about, oh, it doesn't look exactly like what I'm looking at. Like, who cares? Just make a nice painting. That's what you should care about. So if I want it to look exactly like that, I'll just print out a picture. But I am noticing, like on here, around this spot, on that, it has like that little dark shadow lip on there, and I do want to put that in there because I do think that would make a nice addition to our painting. And that part is really dark, so we're going to use the violet on that, get some paint on the brush, and then I kind of go sideways with it with the brush so I can get like a nice good line underneath it there. So paint that in, a little more paint. Paint in that nice line that goes underneath the lip there, and it's less on the left than it is on the right. So just make it a little bigger on the right and have it fade into this spot over here. Looks good. I like that. And then if there is a little bit of a shadow underneath the bottom of this, you could take one of the finer brushes that you have and detail it that way, but I'm not too worried about it. So I'm just going to use this brush. But of course, like if you want it to be a little thinner, you could use the smaller brush even. But I think this comes out fine. That looks good. We're ready to move on to the next spot. And the next thing I'm going to do is the cube, and down here there's a lot of shadow, and then there's a lot of shadow over here. And since I've already got this violet on my brush, we'll just go and take care of both of those spots right now. Oops, a little too much paint though. Get this in here. A little more water on there. Get that painted in. There we go. And then I'm going to go in and do the shadow right now while I'm here, and I've got that color on my brush. Get that shadow in on there. And this part might dry by the time I come back to work with it again, but I can always repaint it a little bit, add a little more paint to it, repaint it. It'll be fine. All right, looks like this shadow goes up just a little bit more up there. And then I can see this edge over here gets to be pretty dark too. So I'm just going to use my violet and a little bit of crimson on this side over here. Because that is mostly in shadow from our bucket here. Goes to about there, and that's when it starts to lighten up a little bit. So we'll start with a crimson around there. Have that go to the top. Right about here. And kind of blend that in. Let's get that up and get that nice line that we want first. There we go. Looks pretty good. And take my dry brush and kind of smooth it out a little bit. Beautiful. That looks good. All right. Now I still got that crimson on this brush, so I can come back in here and start working on this area. Now this whole side never gets as light as that part, so I'm not going to go to the yellow. I think it's just going to go, you know, crimson to orange maybe, and that'll be the lightest it gets. I'm not going to focus on putting all those little dots in there. Of course you could if you wanted to, but I just don't think it's worth my time. But it's up to you. It's your painting. I think it'd look better without it, but that's just me. All right, now we want to start moving into our lighter color with the Naphthol red here. And get a bunch of that in there. Of course, you can move on to a bigger brush if you want on this bigger area, or if you're working on a bigger area. Really depends what you're painting. You can always switch brushes, but like I said, for convenience for today, I'm just going to use these two brushes. Might take a little bit longer, but it'll be fine. And this will go most of the rest of this. Now don't worry too much about like where my brush strokes go when I'm painting a big area like this, because I know I'm going to go back with my other brush, with my dry brush, and smooth it out and get rid of some of those globs of paint and stuff. Because I know, like I said, I'm just going to smooth it out with the other brush anyways. So I don't really worry too much about, you know, where my brush is going. If this was the only marks I'd make, you know, with the brush, I'd maybe stop. You know, or go in one direction, or, you know, not be so chaotic with my brush strokes. But I know I'm just going to go in and change it anyways with another brush. So I really right now just wanted to get the right colors in the right spots, which is the last little bit of orange right there. And then I'm going to go in. Oh, I forgot to wash off my dry brush last time. Get it dry. And start smoothing it out. Go from the top down to the bottom. But like I said, you can go either way. Doesn't really matter, as long as like you don't go from like this dark spot down here and then go up here. So I'll show you what happens. So I'm down here and then I go up here and oh no, now I've got purple up there. It's too dark up there. Or you get too light and go down there. You got to go gradually. But I can always fix this if I just get more of this color on there and go up there and just smooth it out. Smooth it all out and then go back and forth, back down. You know, you can even go a little up and down if you don't go too far. There we go. You just want to make sure you get rid of all those little dots of white on there too. That doesn't make a great painting, to have all those little dots all over it. All right, that looks pretty good. Now up here on the top of the cube is pretty light. It's almost as light as this, but it's more like about this color. So what I'm going to do to start with, of course, wash my brushes off first. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint most of this yellow and then just go in with a touch of the orange and kind of blend it and smooth it out just a little bit. So I get kind of like this color here is what I'm shooting for, I think. So let's get that out of the way. Because you can always mix a little bit on your canvas too. You know, that's what we've been doing kind of through this whole painting too. But you can just be like, okay, I want it to be a light orange. I don't want it to be this bright yellow. I want it to be just a little bit orange, but I don't want it to be as dark as that orange. So you can just be like, okay, I want it to be more of a yellow-orange. So I'll put down mostly yellow to start with. Try and make it so it's not as globby. Get that globby paint out of there. And then now that I've covered the surface that I want, I'll be like, okay, I want it just a little darker in most of it. Like maybe around the corners and stuff, it should maybe be a little brighter. It should be that bright yellow. But most of it, like I want just like a little bit darker. So I'm going to use just a little bit of this orange. And then I'm not going to blend with this brush at all. I'm going to go in and blend with my dry brush and smooth it out. And that looks really good. That looks exactly what I was hoping for. Just a little bit darker yellow. You know, and not as bright as this, but pretty close. Looks good. All right, we just have one shape left, and that's our sphere here. So there's no point on this sphere, though, where it gets really dark as the shadow below it. So I'm not going to go in with the violet on that spot. We're going to go in with just a little bit of crimson near the bottom and have it move up very similar to this, but it's got to go to like this yellow almost, or maybe even the bright yellow, right around the edge of the sphere. So let's start with that crimson. We're just going to use a little bit near the bottom. And there is a spot on here right around the top edge where it's just a little bit darker, and I'm just going to throw in just a touch of that crimson right in there too. So I know it'll blend really well with the other color when I put it in. And let's go in with the Naphthol red and kind of get that smoothed out in there. But that's not going to go too far either. Somewhere around there. And then we need some of that orange and then move it into the yellow. Just a little bit of orange, because I know I can mix that together with my yellow when I put my yellow in and blend it out. So I don't want to use too much of this orange, because really we need a lot more yellow now. Right around there. Let's get this yellow in right there. So right around here is the brightest spot, at least from what I see. Right around there is the brightest spot. And it goes in about there. And this should maybe be even a little brighter, but I'm going to smooth it out first, and then I'll go in and brighten it up even a little more. Let's blend that all in first. And then sometimes, like if I go too far down and I don't want to go back to my lighter spot, of course, wash your brush off or just wipe it off if you want to, one or the other. But I do want some more yellow, so I'm going to put some yellow actually on my dry brush without putting any water in there. And then get that and smooth it in there. Looks like I went a little too far into the darkness, but like I said, you can always wait for it to dry and paint over it. Or if you're impatient like I am, wash your brushes completely and then really go in with some of that lighter spots. But remember, like I said, it's going to be a lot harder to mix the light into the dark. But you can always try. But it's not going to come out exactly perfect. The best way to do it would be just to wait and then repaint it a little bit. But I think it's fine. And I think it would be okay if it's not perfect. But it did come out a little bit lighter. As long as I don't go back too close into that darkness and mix it again. Yeah, I think that's fine. That looks pretty good. So, I got the table left to do. And let's see, is that dry? Yeah, that violet it's still a little wet, but it's mostly dry. So I'm going to go in and repaint that a little bit after we wash our brushes out. And then I'm going to have that drift off, into what the table would be. It would maybe be one of our mid-tones, which is like the naphthol red. So we'll have it mix into that. Just kind of get a little bit in there in the shadow again. Looks pretty good. We got a little bit of shadow right here, a little bit more shadow over there. And we have this mixed into our crimson. We're about like there. That's about where that shadow ends. And this one kind of ends somewhere right around here. A little more crimson in there. And then it gets a lot lighter. Let's see, that goes to about there is where the table ends, somewhere around there. So let's get some of that naphthol in there. And sometimes even like I'll pick up my painting and kind of move it around to paint it if it's a little easier. You see, like getting down to this bottom spot on the easel is pretty tough. So I just pick it up and paint it in my hand if I can. Sometimes you're working on something that's too big to do that, but most of the time you can do it, I think. All right. Then I think like I want to have a little bit of orange, but I think it's mostly this naphthol color is about a mid-tone of the table. So let's just roll with that. Go to about there with it. And when you're doing the background like this is when you can get, nice crisp lines. If you want a nice crisp line on the edge of something, an object like that, there we go. Nice good line on it right there. Get a good line on the bottom here. Looks pretty good. You can take your time with it as much as you want to get it perfectly detailed. I'm kind of rushing through some of this just to get, the video to be not a million hours long. There we go, and then the background kind of goes over here a little bit too. So I'll put the table in a little bit right here too. But I could make it up if I wanted to, you don't have to have that in there. Get that spot a little there. And this is kind of blending in with my cube. So I'm going to kind of change reality a little bit and add a little bit of crimson in there so that it makes it, that cube and my sphere stand out, because it's getting a little too close to that color. So I want to make sure those stand out. So I just kind of changed it a little bit. A little too much right there, but we can smooth that out a little bit. There we go. Looks pretty good. So I want to get this smoothed out with my dry brush. Smooth all those edges out and get those little white dots out of there. I don't like those white dots on my painting. And a little more paint down here I need. There we go. All right, so now all I have left to do is my background here. Get rid of a couple of tiny little dots right there. Get rid of there, little dotters. You go away. I don't want you on my painting. So I just have the background to do now. The main thing you want to do with the background is to make it so that your objects stand out. That's why I changed the table over here. So you want to get a different color than this. You don't want to have the yellow blend into the background here. But over here, like maybe you want it yellow so it doesn't blend in. Or maybe like the, you know, another color there. So I think what would be nice for a background, and you can make up the background however you want. You know, just paint in different shapes or anything. But don't leave it white. That's the main thing. Don't leave it white. But I am going to go with a darker color, I think. Might even try and go real dark over there. We'll see. But I want to use a darker color for the background. Something that'll make my objects really stand out. And I want to make sure, you know, there's a difference. People can tell where the table is too. So go ahead and get those in there. But I don't think I'm going to have the whole thing like this dark color. So right now I'm just going to paint around the objects that I have, and then I might smooth into a different color. Maybe into a crimson, you know, and see what that looks like. Looks good right there. Like that. Yeah, I think I need a little more crimson though. Clean out your brush. Clean your brush, always clean your brushes. Get that crimson in there. We'll have that kind of mix in there. And I can be a little wild with the background. You know, don't worry too much about it. It's all good. And this is where you could definitely use a bigger brush though. But I'm just going to use this one for now. Get a little wild with it. Get a little more water on my brush though. Let the brush strokes kind of go all over the place and be a little, you know, be a little wild with it. It's okay. But if you want to, like, you can take this brush and really smooth it out with your dry brush. But I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to go in like crazy directions with it because it's the background, you know. There we go. All right. I think I want to take this darker color again and go up here with it. Kind of make this object pop out a little bit. To to about here. And then I think, so this doesn't blend in, I think that's where I'll start using some of the crimson. So I'm not going to paint down there with this. Let's get a little more purple, and we'll go around the top of this though. Take that violet over here, go around our yellow. And the purple and yellow are complementary colors. That means like on the color wheel, they're kind of opposite of each other. Like really the true opposite of yellow is like an indigo. The violet is more like a yellow-green. But they're close enough that they're complementary. And that makes each color really stand out. When you use complementary colors, the other color, both colors will like pop each other. They'll make each other really stand out. And they work really well together. But one of the things next week we're going to go over, or the thing we're going to go over next week, is our complementary colors. And we're going to work on that. But we're not going to paint from life anymore. This is the last painting that we're going to do from a still life. We're not going to do that anymore. The rest of the paintings from now on will all be out of our imaginations and just whatever we feel like painting. But we had to do these paintings so we can master our colors. And next week will be the last lesson to master your colors, and then you can say you are a master colorer or a master at color. That looks pretty good. Now let's get a little of that crimson in there in the spots where we need it. I might even need a little more crimson. But let's put it down here, kind of get that background so it doesn't blend in to our objects. That's the main thing with the background. You just don't want it to blend into your objects. You want your objects to stand out. So don't have it blend in too much. Here it blends in a little bit, but I think it's okay. It's just one little spot, between the shape here and the background, but I think it'll be okay. Doesn't look too bad to me. We need a little more paint though, just to finish her off. Just kind of go a little wild with it. It's okay. Main thing, like I said, is just to cover up all the white. I mean, if you want to put something crazy in the background, you can. You could have like a alien spaceship or, big smiley face or whatever you want to put back there. It doesn't really matter as long as the white is covered up. Let it be a little crazy and wild. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Almost done. Just a little bit more here. More water maybe. And then I'm going to go in with a little bigger brush and kind of just blend it, smooth it out a little bit. I don't want to have big globs of paint on my canvas. I just don't like how that looks for a painting like this. Looks better if it's nice and smooth. I did get a little bit of a mistake right there. I was a little too reckless, but you can't really do anything about it while the paint is wet. I'd have to let the paint dry and paint over it. But this painting will dry in about 5 to 10 minutes, so I could fix it then. But overall, we're done. I think it looks really good. Might need one last thing. I didn't notice there's a little bit of a shadow on the bottom of this. So I do want a little bit of purple on the bottom. I use this bigger brush just because I have it. But I want a little bit of purple right on the bottom there. Get a little water on the brush. There we go. Yeah, that looks great. Other than my little mistake over there, but you know, I can fix that after it dries a little bit. Looks good. But like I said, this is the last time that we're going to paint anything from life in this class. I mainly did it just because it's easier to use our color scheme when you're painting from something instead of just trying to paint out of your imagination. It can get a little daunting if you're just trying to paint whatever. But now that we know a good amount about color and how color works, like we can start to go into crazier, more bizarre places. And so next week, we're going to work on our complementary scheme, and we're going to do an abstraction that starts to get into our crazy spot. And then we'll just get a little more crazy as the weeks go on, painting whatever we want, whatever weird, bizarre things we can come up with. All right. Hope you had fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.